Welcome to another segment in our Create series. Today we have Sally Brown, who is an artist, curator, and writer exploring womanhood, motherhood, and the body via her work that includes drawing, painting, and performance. Her award winning work has been exhibited internationally. She's participated in various artist residencies, and her writing has been published in Hyperallergic, Women's Art Journal, and Art Slant. Sally joins us today to discuss creativity in the realm of female artistry. Sally, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. It's really exciting.
We're honored as well. Why don't you give us a little bit background, though? What was your journey like, and what led you to your art form, your body of art form?
Yeah. So I was an undergraduate art major and my specialization was drawing. And so I was just sort of obsessed with taking, it was back in the late 90s, early 2000s. So I would take self-portraits with an actual camera and get them developed. And then I would kind of zoom in, with tape and pencil and create these enlarged self-portraits examining my body as an early 20s person. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. But once I graduated, I thought there's already so many artists in the world. Like, why should I continue when everybody, there's so many other artists to support and to hear from. And so I went into nonprofit administration
Okay.
and I did that for a few years. And then once I had my first baby, 17 years ago, crazy, I just felt like I needed to create again. I just felt really compelled and I started drawing my baby. And then I started, like, when you have a baby, you kind of have this different relationship with your body. So I
Yeah.
was kind of exploring that and like the ownership of my body. So I started doing these self portraits again. I started doing figure modeling for the local university. And so that offered like a unique perspective. And then I started playing with painting my body and abstracting it to see in a completely new expressive realm outside of, societal expectations and just challenging what women's bodies should look like, just
Mm.
completely expressive for fun. And so it's been, my daughter's 17 and I had another child who's 15, and I've just continuously explored and expanded on these series of self-portraits. And then I went back and got my master's in art history and was super inspired by the feminist artists and the feminist movement. And so I've kind of incorporated some of their work and inspirations into mine as well, because, as you know, women artists have been left out of art history, especially women of color. And so it's really important to document these artists and continue recognizing them and their inspiration and impact on the art world and the world in general. So that's been part of my work as well. So integrating my relationship with my body and the expression of my body with the feminists and women and artists who came before me. Yeah.
Awesome. It sounds like it was therapeutic as well. What was the greatest revelation to yourself as you pursued this course? Because you're right, that is a transition. Then after motherhood, sometimes we develop a love-hate relationship with our bodies. It's like we're happy to have it, but I remember I used to look like, 19.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's, my body has changed even since then. I mean, it continues changing as we are, as we get to age.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's definitely a practice in self acceptance and body image and just seeing it for what it can do and its strength and not necessarily for whatever standards we constantly see in the media. But yeah, it's definitely an exercise and more of appreciation than subjective gaze, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I get that. So instead of the question why this particular art form, in your case, it sounds like how could you not do this?
Yes, exactly. That's what I always thought in college. I'm like, how could anybody not study art and draw the figure? Like, yeah, it's
Yeah,
always been a super passion, and it is kind of like a therapy for me too. So, yeah, I just love it. It's fun.
gotcha.
Yeah.
And to anchor our listeners and our viewers, depending on which format they're watching, what is your definition of feminist art? Because there are so many, not only denotations,
Yes.
but connotations out there. So, for the sake of this discussion, how should we anchor that?
I part of my graduate studies was studying feminist theory. So I realize it's like super complex and like some people don't like the word, but to
Mm-hmm.
me it's really simple. Like I can go there, I can get complex and all the things, but for me it's like celebrating women and underrepresented artists. So it's more of like the empowering than it is like the critique, which I get and I've done, and that's super important. But for me, it's recognizing and celebrating women and feminist art and uh, yeah, non-binary artists, the artists who haven't been traditionally a part of Western art history.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
Understood.
so
Thank you for that. That helps.
yeah, thanks for
Um,
asking.
yeah, of course, because there's what we say, and then there's the picture the media may paint, and then there's connotations just from different conversations. And so I wanted to just set the standard so that even if someone has a different understanding, or to them it means something different, they can
Yeah,
hone in on what we're speaking about for this conversation. So thank you for that.
yes, good
um,
point.
but in doing so, share with us, if you will, about your experience. Like, did you realize that you had any biases, any misconceptions, or were there even any myths that you busted along this process that you actually became an artist?
Yes, so many. Oh my gosh. So in undergrad, like I said, in the late 90s, early 2000s, one of my favorite professors actually said you cannot be an artist and a mother. This was not that long ago. Like,
What?
yeah, yeah. And so I mean, at that time, I wasn't really my minor was art history, but I really wasn't that
No, they
educated on
actually said that.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, this was not that long
I'm
ago,
not
and
sure what one
so
has to do with the other, but okay.
yes, yeah, yeah, I remember that, and he said, "If you're not willing to live in a cardboard box and, not have relationships, then you cannot be a successful artist." I was like,
Oh,
"Whoa, okay."
God.
So,
Oh my
you
God.
know, yeah, that was tough. So, I mean, that could have been part of the reason that I gave it up at that time, I don't know, but then when I went back to it, when I had my first baby, it was a lot of work exploring my nude form and this expressive um, work using my body, and figure modeling is nude with other people that draw you. And I didn't realize this, but the first time I showed my work after my daughter was born, it was the first series of body prints I called Voice,
Mm-hmm.
and each of them had a little quote from a woman artist that I had interviewed because I'm a writer too. And I was so excited. I was in this group show, and I was like, I'm gonna get back into it. And then at the opening, which was really fun and popular, most people asked me what my kids think about it and what do your kids think about you doing work around the nude, and what of your my favorite, what about your kids' friends in the future? I'm like, what? So I was really unprepared for the criticism that I got for that first series, and so I went back and I did more research. I looked up women artists before me that have been criticized: Sally Mann, Alice Neal, and I'm like, okay, so obviously I'm not the first person to do nude work and get criticized as a mother. And so I did a whole new series. I called it What Will Her Kids Think,
Mm.
that integrated these women artists and women artists around me who are mothers and face that. And so I really kind of took it head on. And so yeah, that was one thing. And then another thing I think is when I went to grad school, I studied Judy Chicago among like other feminist artists, and I read her autobiography from the 1970s when she was in school, and I just couldn't believe how many things she went through that I was going through in the 2000s. Like she
Oh,
didn't know,
wow.
yeah, she didn't know about women artists, and she had to teach herself. And here I am doing the same things. Like, oh, I wasn't. There's these women artists who were doing body prints before me. I never learned about them. I had to like go to the Andy Warhol Museum and see one by chance and then research her. And so it was just astounding. So that's part of why I keep women artists and feminist artists before me in my work, because they just continue to be underrepresented and marginalized in texts and exhibitions, and that's getting better, but it's still not on par with,
Of
traditional art
course.
history. So yeah.
That's there's a phrase or something that's commonly said along the lines of the more the more new things come out, the more I realize that history continues to repeat itself.
Right. Yeah, that's such a
Yeah,
good quote. Yeah.
yeah,
So true. Which is why your program is so important too, because more women's
thank you.
voices in all fields need to be heard and documented and recognized, so we can all feel, like we're part of this society. And
Right,
yeah.
right. This is a totally, totally different conversation, but there are so many voices missing from history, in
I
particular
know.
in the Western world.
Yes.
And it's real easy for people to think that either only one group of people or one gender has ever done anything all throughout history because that's how it's presented. But if you
Right.
look at the world, how could you honestly not question the validity of that? Out of all the peoples that exist, out of
Hmm.
all the cultures, out of all the ethnicities, out of all the countries, do you honestly believe that only certain groups, certain one gender was responsible for all of it? And if you
Right.
do, then I'm a I'm a pray. I'm a pray.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
that's like I said, that's a different conversation because I mean, just
Yes.
even amongst, women themselves, like I believe in a global sisterhood. I don't believe that sisterhood is dead. I just believe that it's not often experienced, which is why moments like this are valuable as well. But women, you can't paint us with a broad stroke and say it's all cookie cutter. Like,
Right. Very true.
so how much more so throughout history. But anyway, I digress. Apologies.
Yeah. No, you're very right. Yes. And like you said, that's another discussion, but it is an important one, not to
Yeah,
forget.
yeah. So you mentioned the research you did and that you had to find your own answers, basically. So can you talk about, just briefly, were there any interesting facts or trivia within the scope of the work that you do that we may not know about that you were like, hey, really? Okay.
I mean, the first one that comes to mind, and there's a few different aspects to this.
Mm-hmm.
So, when I got my graduate degree, when I was studying in art history, I got super into feminist art because, like I told you,
Yeah.
and my advisor told me when I went to New York to see Judy Chicago's The Dinner Party, which is this humongous 48 by 48 triangular dinner table with 39 place settings, each dedicated to a different woman in Western history.
Oh,
And they're ornate, they're beautiful ceramic and these long, beautiful embroidered runners. And if you're in feminist art, you know Judy Chicago. And so I was like, well, everybody knows Judy Chicago. I want to do somebody who's not known or whatever. But I'll go see it. It's Judy Chicago, see it. So I went and saw it. And it was not only this huge masterpiece, which by the way had mirrored walls. So like the experience of like seeing this dinner table and then yourself in like infinity was just like mesmerizing. Like, the women are actually just all around you in history. But she had these educational panels about all of the women in Western history. And I had not heard of like any of these women. They were not in my history books. Like,
wow.
and so it was like astounding and so inspiring. So that, and you can read up on this. It's in the Brooklyn Museum. You can read up on it on their website. But
Mm-hmm.
the other part was that the curating of this piece, not only did it have historical context, but she had these poems on these embroidered banners to kind of calm yourself before you see the big installation. And then she also had documentary panels, which like talked about the process. She had 400 volunteers help her with this. And
Oh, wow. That's
yeah,
quite
so
a
it's
sizable
like,
project.
exactly. So I was really impacted by the curatorial display.
Okay.
So my thesis, my long story is that when you're in museums or galleries, pay attention to how it's curated, where the women artists or the artists of color are placed,
Mm.
how the labeled text read, because oftentimes it will compare them to the white male who's famous in whatever art period. And so that kind of really opened my eyes. And so that's what my thesis was about, is the curating and how that impacts viewer perception. So I think that's kind of like one of my aha moments, as well as just how much history we just haven't learned for women artists. But yeah, that's kind of a large answer.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's fine.
Yeah,
That's what we're here to discuss, and I appreciate that because even the curation of it can impact what your perception is and even what you take away. Like, there's a lot to be said about displays, the arrangement, whatever the location, even lighting. All these things play into how much someone may pay attention to it, the exhibits that they may gravitate towards, and the ones that they may stay away from.
exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah. Or
yeah.
how they understand it. Like, yeah, placing like a, Georgia O'Keeffe, if her little label has all about Alfred Stieglitz and how he made her career happen, well, that's very different than telling her actual life story and how she, persevered and made herself a really successful artist. So
In fact,
yeah.
one of my sons has a print.
Oh,
We're going to say
nice.
it's a print. Yeah, it's a print because he picked it up from an antique store, so we haven't had it examined or anything, but he was drawn to it. He loved the colors of it, and so yeah, it hangs in his room. That is
That's
his favorite thing.
awesome.
So
Oh,
yeah,
I love hearing that. Yay.
heck yeah, I know, right? Yay!
Yeah,
That's like mom pro, but
for sure. Love it.
oh wow, yeah, that is awesome. Um, but you actually work with a blank canvas. So
I do. Yeah.
what is that like for you? Like, what does a blank canvas represent? But what
Yeah,
you
that's a good question because so in undergrad, I was a drawing major, and all the professors were like, fill up the page, fill up the page, don't leave blank space. And so I did, and I was obsessed with that. I would fill up pastel or charcoal or whatever. And then when I came back to it, I was kind of like, well, I don't have to do that.
right?
And so part of that's one aspect. And the other aspect is part of my work is I really like the raw format against like the traditionally pristine, like huge Monet with these gold frames. Like I like the more like Nancy Spiro, Louise Bourgeois, like expressive, like raw format that challenges that traditional patriarchal way of seeing art. So that's part of the reason. And the other part of the reason is that, like I said, when you have a baby, you feel like you you don't feel like you have a lot of space, right? Like your baby is on you all the time and it's like, oh my gosh. And so that was also, it's kind of like a play with space, like literally and like, abstractly. So yeah, I just love the raw look that paint or drawing has on the page, and then how space kind of like challenges the viewer, if that makes sense.
Yeah, of course. The
Okay.
utilization of space, because
Yeah.
you could even say in your instance, and correct me if I'm wrong. What I am hearing you imply is that the blank canvas for you is a statement in itself.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you said it.
No, I just wanted to be sure, because this is a discussion. So, yeah, gotcha. And would you refer to your professors wanting you to fill the space up? Do you attribute it to technique or more clutter? Like, because I can already tell that, yes, even without your work being abstract at times, that the painting, the drawing, whatever the work is, for you, it is what it is. It can stand alone, and you don't particularly feel the necessity to fill up the space. But yet, it sounds like maybe that could be a technique. Maybe that's the version of doing it right. you know? So,
Yeah.
does that lead to, is it clutter? Because is that really necessary to fill up the space, or does it have more to do with the way that we've been trained to view art and art as acceptable?
Yeah, that's a really good question because I remember they were telling us to do that because when you go in to art school and you start drawing, you kind of, you have your pencil and you're like way close up to it and they're like, no, 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 no. Use use the space, use your whole arm back up, like
Okay.
use the whole thing. Don't leave white space. So in that way it's kind of technique. But
Okay.
in the other way, I like your idea of like clutter. Like it can be like unnecessary if you don't feel the need to fill up the space, then you don't need to fill up the space.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I like that way of thinking.
Okay. So if it's not adding to the art, then it's detracting from it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
All right. Understood.
true.
Understood. Thank you. I appreciate that. Where do your ideas originate from? Like, we know the topics that you are addressing with your artwork, but where do your actual ideas, your concepts come from?
Good question. So I think it's a lot in conversation with other artists. Like right now, I'm participating in a virtual artist in residency with this program called Wobbled, WAABLE, which is
Okay.
a play on words with wobble, like you know, staying in balance.
Weeble
But
wobbles.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's what I think of too. I'm like, oh, okay, that's cool. Um, so I have these weekly meetings with the director, and I think a lot of it is just in conversation, like, and even in this conversation, like you asking me and having these other perspectives on my own work. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So she has talked about a lot about my use of space as well. And while I have this series that I call the feminist, my feminist tribute series, and I have little mini self portraits with a reproduction of a mini reproduction of a famous feminist artwork in the in the background. And so I've been doing those for a few years, but I thought as I'm 8 and I'm 43 now, and my body is changing. And so I wanted to do something about that, about like body acceptance and like all of my work is, but something different, I guess, in this way. And so I am doing this series again of self portraits. And I have the entire background inspired by a feminist artist, like more abstract, like Alma Thomas or Micheline Thomas, no relation. Um, and then I'm making my boyfriend is making a wooden frame that has portions of the wood covering up, like you're looking through a window, like
Oh,
parts of myself, parts of my body. So it's kind of a play on, body acceptance and the viewer's gaze. And so I don't know. I guess my answer to the question is it's kind of organic and it's also like with people around me, if that makes
gotcha.
sense. Yeah. It's also visiting museums or reading books, but a lot of it is in conversation with other women and artists.
In line with that, so can you walk us through what does your creative process look like then?
It's very, so I have to come up with ideas first. And I, people have said that I think of the end first, which I don't always do, but oftentimes I will think of a series. I guess most of my drawing series are end focused. I will think of an idea for a whole series and then I will plan out um, what I need, watercolor, pencil, charcoal. And so I'll get the materials and then I will take the self portraits and translate them into a drawing. I will look at feminist artists and kind of match match up their style with the pose or the format, and again decide which media I'm going to go with, and just create a whole series like that. But then with my body prints, I kind of go backwards. So if I want to make a series of body prints that day, I'm like, what colors am I feeling? It's way more intuitive. I feel like beach colors today. So I'll do a whole series of like 10 different posed body prints, and then I'll kind of sit with them and like feel what what conversation I want to have with them. And oftentimes I'll use text, so I'll pencil in text like essays from different artists or quotes from different artists on a certain theme. So yeah, I kind of have two different artist processes, I guess. Yeah,
You do. Have
it's
you
fun.
ever scrapped a project?
Yes. Oh
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You got to tell me what triggered it then. Like,
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I did this series of I tried to do like camouflage, and it just it just didn't look good. It just didn't work. Like, I was trying to play with like masculinity, and it's
okay.
just, I mean, that's cool. I wish, but it's just not me. My work is just kind of feminine, and that's okay.
Hmm.
So I still have some of them downstairs, but it's just not working. And then I made another one. I did like collages with so when they were younger, they would draw and paint and color and all this stuff. So I kept a lot of them. I gifted to family, but some of them you just have to let go. And so I made this
Yes.
collage,
Yes, you do.
right? Yeah. So I was like, well, I could use this as a canvas. So I collaged a bunch of those together and like body printed over it. But like the combination just, it doesn't work. Then there's a bunch of like drawings that just don't work. And so I think that's okay. I think I have fun and I try things and they just don't all work out. That's okay.
Okay. Like,
Yeah.
I'm learning a lot during this series as well, and one of the things that other female creatives have said um, is that they don't hesitate to scrap a project. They don't hesitate to break it down and recreate something new depending on the medium they're working with. Not as much as pottery, but we spoke to a woman who uses polymer clay
Oh,
to
cool.
make jewelry and some other items for basket weaving. Um, and I think it's like, how many times do not only other women, but myself, it's like you put so much into this, and the thought at times of letting it go, um, of deconstructing it in order to create something new, sometimes we hesitate, or sometimes
Yeah.
we ain't going to it too long, and it's
Yes.
not really working. But
Yeah.
it's I think the thought is sometimes that you're throwing away your work. So if you're throwing away your work, did it ever have any value? And what I'm learning through this series is that it doesn't mean it didn't have value. It just wasn't for you at the time, right at that time, or it wasn't the right representation that you wanted to put out. So it's okay.
Yeah, and letting go sometimes feels really good. Like,
Yeah.
I'll get in the mood and I go through like a pile of works in progress and I'm just like, "You know what? This is not gonna work. I'm not gonna finish this." And it feels good, right?
Yeah.
It's like, "Oh, okay, now I don't have to think about that one anymore."
Yeah. Because
Move
that's a
on.
way to finish something too. The way to
True.
finish
Yeah.
something is to toss it out. It's like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm done.
Yep. Good point. Yeah. Check.
Check box quickly.
Yep. I like
Got
that.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is awesome.
Yeah.
Um, but also, how do you know when a work is complete? Because you are dealing in abstracts and your work is subjective, especially if you decided that it's going to become something else other than when you started out. So, how do you know when a work is complete?
I mean, it's totally all my ego and all my intuition. It's whether I like it or not, to be honest. Like, I love this one. I love how the body print goes with the text and,
Yeah.
how the balance is, or I love these colors. I love how, my pose complements or is in relationship with the feminist artwork that I'm tributing. So it's basically just whether I like it or not, and whether some critic or some random viewer at the gallery likes it or not, or thinks it's done. I don't know, but yeah, it's how I do it, and I enjoy it, and so yeah, that's okay. I don't have professors critiquing me anymore.
That's right. You sure don't. Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, it's amazing. Can you, we hear stories all the time about people that just gave up, the wrong word,
yes, right,
in the
yeah,
wrong understanding. And there are a lot of people that just like, okay, I'm done. Maybe they were right. I can't do this, or I
yeah,
shouldn't do this, you know.
yeah.
So, obviously you saw some value in what you were doing somewhere, that even though you left, you did in fact come back. So, what was that? I mean, can you explore that a little bit more with it? What was it that made you come back, and what was it that you saw value in your own work, in your own creation?
I have to give a lot of credit to my mentor, Wanda Ewing. When I came back and when I had my baby and I felt that urge again, I just kind of like asked her, and she was just this professor at the local university I had met before, and I asked her if she would work with me, getting back into drawing, and she did, and she was just amazing and like so encouraging, and she would always be super honest, and she's like, you know what, I have a pile of works in my basement and I'm, exhibiting in museums. If you make a work and it doesn't work or it's in your basement or whatever, who cares? It's just you making your work, and that's what it's about. And so that she really helped me kind of come out of my shell. And the other thing is, I was an arts journalist. I was hustling around town, reviewing exhibits, interviewing artists, and I also started a blog on women are interviewing women artists. And I think part of doing that was to give myself confidence to see these other women creating unabashedly, and to give myself permission. So I think a
Mhm.
combination of Wanda, of my arts journalism, and my blog kind of gave me that, and having my baby and wanting myself back, some of my individuality back, all of that kind of combined into, I'm just going to do this whether it sells or is successful or not. So yeah.
And I think there are times we owe that to ourselves, no matter what the outcome. Do it because
Exactly.
we feel it needs to be done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Whatever that urge is, I mean, obviously as long as it's safe and everything.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah. No bungee jumping for me though.
Right,
Uh,
no, me neither. No thanks.
but I do other stuff, honestly. But that's another conversation. Uh,
Sounds like a fun one.
you should visit. Uh, let's the starving artist. You are not.
I am
What
not
is
starving,
your
no.
is your take? Because I'm like, yeah, you look quite healthy to me. But
Thank you. Yes,
but
thankful.
what's your take on that? Because that is still a stereotype, and it's an archetype as well. So can you
I
speak to that?
know.
Like, what do you have to say?
Yeah. I mean, like my professor said so 20 years ago, like, you can't be an artist unless you live in a cardboard box. That's not true. And I really don't like that, how people think about that. Like, my parents said, well, you should be an art teacher so you can, make money.
Hmm.
And that's fine. I did try that, but I did not go there. But yeah, I just don't like that because I think it's so limiting, right? You
Hmm.
think of like, Van Gogh, and he wasn't successful and whatever, but that's not that's not the only way to be successful, or like the common way. There's so many different ways to be an artist now, right? I mean, my day job is curating. I'm also a writer, and just because I'm not in the Louvre yet doesn't mean I'm not a successful artist,
Right.
I think. Yeah. So,
Right.
I mean, being a rich um, Jeff Koons is good for him, cool. But it's not the it's not the only way to be an artist. And being a starving artist out on the corner painting, that's cool too, but it's not, I think, the most common. I think the most common is kind of in the middle, the where I am, and then hopefully someday I will get that respect maybe in a higher institution, but until then, I'm just creating, and that's successful enough for me, and I'm showing in local galleries and across the world, and
Yeah.
that's
Even in
cool.
UK, right?
Yeah, yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm doing international artist residencies, and so, yeah, there's just so many different ways of being a successful artist, and I I just think that's passé to talk about the starving artist anymore, for sure. It's limiting. So, yeah.
Totally agree. Totally agree. What's one thing you wish people knew about your craft, though?
I don't know. There's a couple things. Like one is that I hope you learn something, right? That's part of it. That's part of the reason that I honor other artists in my work, is so you're like, "Oh, oh, Renee Cox. Cool. Who's that?" Go look her up. Oh, wow. Oh my gosh, that's awesome. And the other is that it can also just be playful and fun, feminine work if you don't like get that much out of it. And also just the fact that still I have a day job, I have 2 kids, and I have friends and a boyfriend and a life, but I'm still creating like every day. And just kind of like seeing that and for itself, I think is, I don't know, yeah, it's kind of inspiring, if I do say so. I'm
I
hardworking. Yeah.
Yeah, I say so also. That is definitely inspiring.
Thanks. So, yeah, a couple things.
What's next on the agenda for you?
I'm working on this new series, and I also have this blank canvas that one of my friends gave me for Christmas, and so my goal is this year to make something with it. It's the biggest canvas I would have ever worked with, so there's that. And then I'll have an exhibition at the end of the year, so that's something to look forward to,
Here
for
in the
sure. Oh, and I
city?
have a book coming out too,
Oh,
a book.
wow.
Yeah, so I illustrate books, and this book is with my friend poet Renee Nicholson, and it's all about Appalachian monsters. So I'm currently based in West Virginia, and we have all these lores and myths and stuff. So it's really playful. It's really something not aligned with what I normally do, but it's a really fun, playful book. So I'm excited about that too. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Yeah, let us know when it comes out. And it's going to be interesting to see what you do with that canvas, though.
Yes, I know. I'm excited.
Do you feel challenged by that due to the sheer size of it?
I do,
Okay.
because I mean, just the logistics of it. I mean, I have a garage, so I guess that's going to be the avenue. But then just like getting it out and putting it away, like I don't. That's another thing is with being like, a Jeff Koons or a Judy Chicago, is they have many more resources than do middle career artists. So that's a challenge, but it's a good challenge. I'll figure it out.
Oh, yes. I'm confident. You sure will. You
Yeah,
certainly will. And it's going to be awesome regardless what you do with it. So,
thanks.
yeah. How can our listeners and viewers reach you?
My website's sallyjanebrown.com. Super simple, super American name. And then I'm at salary_art on Instagram. So that's SALLERY_art. It's a play on gallery.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm also on Facebook and Twitter and YouTube if you look for Sally Jane Brown. So, but yeah, you can find all that on my website. Yeah.
Good. Last
Thank you.
question for you.
Yes.
What does creativity mean to you?
Creativity, I think, is like a perspective. I mean, it's one thing to create and or make music or, write. I think those are all like forms of creativity, but I also think it's a way of seeing and like looking in a different way, or looking and trying to find new ways to approach life and art, and just being present and, um, like if you're on a walk or you're at work or whatever, just like looking around and seeing things in like a different way, if that makes sense. So it's kind of like a proactive, I guess, just present way of being, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And you
Yeah.
know what? It only has to make sense to you, but yes, it does. It makes
Yeah.
perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because each
Yeah.
of us needs things in our lives and experience things that are unique to us. So, yeah, we know why, as long as we
Yeah.
know why. Yeah,
Exactly. Yeah, I like that.
yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
great. Sally, thank you so much for being with us and sharing your insight, your body of work with us, as well as your perspectives. We appreciate it.
Thank you. This has been so much fun. I'm excited.
Me too. Me too. And to our listeners and viewers, thank you again for staying with us throughout this Create series. We have enjoyed interviewing every single female creative that participated. Hope you have gained insight, wisdom, see your own creativity in a different light, and are able to glean some of the lessons from these stories that you can apply in many different ways across your own space. I am Chris Vaughn. This is In Her Company.